Welcome to section 4 of chapter 10, where we will have a short section looking at culture and adolescent development, looking at some cross-cultural comparisons and ethnicity. So there's a whole list of cross-cultural comparisons that they talk about in the book. I would like you to read that section. I'm only going to talk about one right now, and that is gender differences um, cross-culturally. Make sure you do read about the other cross-cultural comparisons as well, though. As far as gender differences, one major difference is that males have far greater access to educational opportunities in much of the world. Um, and this is something that varies from one country to another. There are countries that are obviously much more equal, such as our own, but in some countries, education is restricted only for males, or it may be that certain grade levels or certain academic subjects are restricted only for use by males. So there are many different different educational rules or norms from one culture to another, but generally speaking, males do have more opportunities. The second gender difference I'll mention is there are more restrictions on the sexual activity of adolescent females compared to males. This is especially true in countries like India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and in Arab countries. In all of these areas, there are quite heavily more restrictions on adolescent females and their romantic or sexual activities compared to the males. The good news is that both of these differences I've mentioned, educational opportunities and restrictions on sexual activity, in both cases, the differences appear to be narrowing over time between the genders. So in more recent cross-cultural comparisons, we are trending towards more equality, although there's still a long way to go. Ethnicity and immigrants. Uh, Immigrants, as it says here, experience multiple stressors, including language barriers. They're separated from their support systems and separated from their culture. They're more likely to experience depression and low self-esteem as well as discrimination. There are multiple barriers to immigrants to any country. And this is certainly true in the U.S. Um, and one problem that shows up in when we research different ethnicities, sometimes conclusions are made about ethnicities that really turn out to be more a function of socioeconomic status. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of research that gets done that doesn't really tease apart those two variables. The problem is that we often have ethnic communities or ethnic areas that are also very poor areas. When the ethnicities are being researched, uh, in as far as their behaviors and their accomplishments and I don't know the education levels, IQs, whatever it might be. I mean, the fact that they are poor and of lowest socioeconomic status is a confounding variable, and yet some researchers or people that observe research results make make false conclusions based on ethnicities that are really more about socioeconomic status. So I think I mentioned this in an earlier lecture, but always consider when you hear or read about one ethnicity being more likely to perform certain behaviors, particularly some form of negative behaviors. always consider that maybe this is just a poor person issue. Uh, Plenty of research supports the fact that poor people, for instance, commit more crimes. They're more likely to steal things out of necessity because they're poor, and because of their stressful living conditions, it often leads to more violence within the communities. So when we see a community made up of a certain ethnicity showing some of these behaviors, more crime, more violence, etc., don't point the finger necessarily at that specific ethnicity, but keep in mind that we know that poor people exhibit those types of behaviors, poor people of any ethnicity. So just point out, I think this is a very important point that often they get mushed together, ethnicity and socioeconomic status. They both often exist at the same time. We know that we have a lot more lower socioeconomic status ethnic families in the U.S. compared to non-Latino white families, and so when we are searching for results having to do with ethnicity, they may actually turn out to be results having to do with poverty or low socioeconomic status. Okay. Um, Finally, what I was just saying is that these things get blended together. So when we research low SES minority adolescents, keep in mind that they have a double disadvantage that includes both prejudice and poverty, whereas middle income minority adolescents would only experience prejudice or discrimination and bias, and not necessarily and not poverty. But in most cases, once again, those two things do go together. Many minorities are also poor. Okay, and that will bring us to adolescent problems, which will be in the next video.